particularly the Republican Party, which about half of it are dominated by people who call themselves Republicans. They may even believe that they're Republicans, but the philosophy that they are protecting is the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. Welcome back to the Professor Penn podcast. David Penn, glad to be your host on this Tuesday evening, March 25th, for episode number 191, which I call Civil War. Before we start, I want to thank all of you for being part of this community. I want to say up front, if you're new, we are a politically motivated group of people. The point of the podcast, I want to be entertaining. I like to be funny sometimes. I want to have a good time. I want you to have a good time. But what we're really about here is getting every single participant in this community into the political rat race, I guess I would call it today, rat race, to use a Bob Marley tagline, for the sole purpose of saving our country. Please visit precinctstrategy.com. Please, from my heart, I say to you, I believe this. We are on the verge of a cataclysm. And I believe that the only way we're going to pull back from this is the participation of individual sovereign citizens of this republic going into the political party, particularly the Republican Party, which about half of it and all of its apparatus are dominated by people who call themselves Republicans. They may even believe that they're Republicans, but the philosophy that they are protecting is the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. And I'm trying to get through to these people, and they don't like me because they don't want to look in the mirror and say, oops, I made a mistake. I made a mistake. I made a mistake about, I don't know, 1981 with President Reagan, who is revered amongst the Republicans as a saint. But most of the people in the party who are holding the positions of authority and power are of that Reagan era, and they hold on to the Reagan philosophies, which are globalist in the extreme. And we've carried that forward progressively, and I mean that very sincerely, progressively over the decades. And we got the George Bush 1 and George Bush 2. And what we've been moving towards is one world government, one world economy, one world currency. It's still the goal of these people, even though their agenda and their plans are in tatters. And when I say these people, we name these people, both big and small, here on the podcast because they've surfaced. I mean, it's like a submarine. You can't see it when it's under the water. But when it blows ballast and comes up to the surface, you can see it. And when does a submarine come up? Either when the war is over or when it's disabled. And right now, it's both. The war is really over with the globalists. They've lost. They're just not going to get what they wanted in the way they planned to get it. So now, for them, it's by any means possible. And I worry a lot about President Trump. And, he's that age. He's that age. He's of this generation. And there is a tremendous unbalance to the scientific and a big void where faith used to be. And I'm not assigning that to President Trump. I'm just saying of this generation. And we're going to talk about that tonight because we really are on the verge of civil war. And when I say civil war, the war could be civil. I mean, it could be without violence. But you're watching the news and you're watching these Teslas burn up all over the country. And we're heading into the spring. It was beautiful this morning driving in. Man, good morning, Tanner.
Good morning.
Did you notice it was a little bit summer-like on the way in, driving in this morning?
Yeah, I heard the birds singing. It's when I can hear the black-capped chickadees doing their little unique song.
Yeah.
And that's when I know it's starting to come.
It's time, man.
Yeah.
We're heading into the the warmth of the summer, which is generally something to look forward to. But I view it this year with some trepidation because of all the calls for violence and insurrection and the polarization, the inability that we have to talk to each other. We don't listen. And even within the Republican Party, I'm running for the chair of CD3 after my great loss in SD45. And not that CD3, that's a congressional district, it's about 800,000 people. I'm not holding great hopes of victory because the apparatus controls these elections. It controls them. And when I say it controls them even down to the point where I've been in two different conventions where the count in the back room has been a mistake, so to speak. So, I mean, if I'm saying things and people are watching me, you don't like it, hey, tough. It's time for us to look in the mirror and get real about where we're at as American citizens. This is not about Republicans and Democrats. It's about globalists and nationalists. And do we want to maintain a country, a Republican country, the idea of republicanism being a life philosophy which is promised to every state that joins the Union? A Republican form of governance is promised to every state that joins this union in our Constitution. And the Civil War, I think, has begun. And I'm going to say that it began on the 22nd of March. And why I'm going to say that is that's the day that Donald Trump, in his role as president, took an executive action to revoke the security clearances and access to classified information for many very famous people. And what is a security clearance? A security clearance is like a credit check, it's a background check. It says, hey, you have a security clearance because you're A-OK as an American. You're not a foreign agent. You're not a criminal. We can trust you with secure information. And when President Trump revokes security clearances, as he did on his memorandum, which was issued on the 21st of March. It was titled Rescinding Security Clearances and Access to Classified Information from Specified Individuals. Uh, you can go see it on the whitehouse.gov website, which I urge every citizen, please do your own research. I'm trying to point the audience in the direction of where they can find the evidence. But let me just help and provide some of these names. Um, Former U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken uh, denied he no longer has a security clearance. In other words, he's not okay with the U.S. government, at least this government. Jake Sullivan, former National Security Advisor under President Biden, uh, he's now off the list. Um, I'm going to skip the lesser lights. Oh, here's Letitia James, former New York Attorney General, access denied. Alvin Bragg, former Manhattan District Attorney, access denied. Uh, Andrew Weissman, now on MSNBC as a commentator, former prosecutor in the Mueller investigation. Oh, here's a big name. Hillary Clinton, access denied. Elizabeth Cheney, access denied. Oh, here's one that'll shock you. Camilla Harris no longer has a security clearance, access denied. Adam Kinzinger, okay, great. Oh, here's one. Joseph R. Biden Jr., former President of the United States, access denied. Uh, these are not so impactful in terms of these folks having access to information or not. That's not the issue. The issue is that the current administration has branded these people as not worthy of being trusted with a security clearance. To me, that's a major shift in our body politic. It's a kind of demarcation, a kind of polarization that I haven't seen in my lifetime. The denial of access to secure information for a former president. That's a big deal. So we have this going on. It's not a surprise that you're seeing today, and as we had breaking the news yesterday, that there was a alleged security faux pas, a breakdown that involved a signal group talking about war plans in Yemen, and a reporter was actually, was mistakenly included in this group. This was a reporter for Atlantic Magazine. We're not really going to know what happened. We're just not. Seems a little far-fetched that this guy got in there by mistake, but I have to say, anybody who's been in business has had the awful feeling of sending the wrong email to the wrong person or the right email to the wrong person, however you want to think about it. I mean, have you done this? I mean, just ask yourself, did you ever press send and go, oops, I wish I hadn't done that? And that was before the days of the recall. That still is only 50% of the time it only works. But you send it out and you go, God, what did I do? And you feel so awful about what just happened because it was actually dumb. It was a mistake. Well, of course, the Democrats, who really don't have too much going on right now, jumped all over this as evidence of incompetence, and it was a mistake. I mean, the real issues are, why were they talking about this on Signal? And then you want to really go down to the real serious issue. Why are we talking about killing people? I mean, that's who we are. We're killing people all over the world still. In this case, brown people in Yemen. Great for the business model. Let's blow some stuff up. It's time to order some more weapons. Great. And we're not even going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about the policy of President Trump saying he was going to annihilate the Houthis. That's not even up for discussion because there seems to be broad bipartisan agreement about that. It's the fact that it leaked out by accident. Okay. So, what's a diversion? What's important? What's important to me is we have broad bipartisan agreement about what's going on in the Middle East. No one's complaining about attacking the Houthis. I don't even, Tanner, have you heard AOC or Bernie Sanders or anybody saying, hey, what are we doing here with the Houthis?
I've not been listening to anything they've been saying. I need to do a better job. They're on some tour right now, right?
Right.
Yeah. I haven't listened to them.
Have you tuned them out, so to speak?
Not on purpose. It was more that I was sick, not paying attention on my phone too much.
Are you feeling better?
Much better. I probably sound better too. But I turned on and saw that they were in New York doing a rally, and I'm seeing a lot of stuff on people questioning the crowd, and I haven't really listened to what they had to say.
The fact that the crowds were professional protesters.
Yeah, I haven't looked into it myself because anybody can say anything, but apparently they did like phone records where they could see that it was like 80% of the crowd there, their phones were connecting at 7 different rallies that were like Kamala's, all the different Democrat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could it be? We don't know.
It could, but yeah, I don't see the phone logs. I don't know how that works. How does that person on TikTok even have that information? I don't know.
Well, it's been very widely distributed, disseminated, that these are professional protest attendees.
Yeah.
And it could be. It could be. I don't know.
I've done it in the past, so it's a thing of like, yeah, it could be, but I don't have the proof for it.
Maybe are you capable of delving into that?
I could. I'll see what I can find.
It'd be a nice sidebar for a young, technologically savvy individual such as yourself. I'm glad you're feeling better. I'm proud to say that I was in the studio with Tanner doing multiple recordings when he was sick with COVID.
Yeah.
And as of today, I have not got the disease, so I think that's cool. We weren't wearing masks, and we're about.
We weren't 6 feet all the time,
no,
but
we
we just didn't touch the same surfaces, and I
Right.
didn't cough at you.
No, we tried to be cool, but there was no fear here in Free People Radio coming to you from the belly of the beast here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We just went about our business. I thought about it. I thought, man, I'm a little old to be getting COVID, and that was cool. So we're living in a dream right now, all of us, particularly if you're watching me and you're a delegate to the CD3 convention. We're in a dream. We think things are headed in the right direction. Actually, we're in the fog of war at a level that is unprecedented in my lifetime. There is an effort by President Trump to curtail the violence in the Ukraine. And no sooner did he announce that he had spoken to President Putin and President Zelensky, and both sides had agreed to a cessation of attacks on energy infrastructure, or it could have been energy and infrastructure, was unclear. And nobody sat down to codify this yet. And it's not clear to me exactly what happened, but there was first a huge effort in the pro-war media to say that no sooner had President Trump announced this effort that the Russians had attacked energy infrastructure in the Ukraine. And then a couple days later, it came out that President Zelensky had attacked first with the largest ever drone strike in the history of this war. Can't tell. And I'm not going to take the time to figure it out because the only thing that really matters is they're still killing each other. So that's not a surprise. There are great forces that are very focused on continuing this war. And we're going to talk about that because what is a civil war? Okay, a civil war. There are many dimensions to this war. This war is going to be fought at my CD3 convention on April 12th here in Minnesota, in Wayzata, where we're going to have this convention. And I'm going to stand up there against another candidate, and it's better than the SD45 candidate because this guy at least is not completely full of you-know-what. This man is, actually a friend of mine. I don't have a personal animus for this guy. His name is Stan Hamilton. He means well. He just... He doesn't get it, and I understand not getting it because, again, he's a little bit older than me, and he comes out of that Reagan era, and there is a certain level of acceptance of these events, and rah-rah, let's go America. Can you play this first clip where Trump gave Iran 2 months to negotiate a new nuclear deal, please?
Now, one person who's definitely not pulling any punches against the US president is Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. On the US onslaught against the Houthis or against Donald Trump's threat letter to Iran for a new nuclear deal. Khamenei has openly labeled Donald Trump as a brute and a bully who deserves, quote-unquote, nothing but a tight slap. Khamenei, in fact, spelled out that all US threats against his country will fail. Trump had explicitly linked the Houthi action against the United States to Iran, warning that Tehran would suffer consequences. Now, Tehran's supreme leader downplayed the links to the Houthis, rubbishing all threats.
Regional resistance groups have their own motivations. Iran doesn't need proxies. What does proxy even mean? They are on their own. Let the Americans be aware. When dealing with Iran, they will never get anywhere by making threats.
Trump's letter to Iran earlier this month reportedly spoke of a 2-month deadline for reaching a new nuclear deal, and rejection was clearly meant to be interpreted as inviting Israeli or US military action. Khamenei had some strong words for the White House.
We have never been the initiator of conflict or started fights over this or that, but if somebody acts with evil and starts a conflict, he should know that he will receive harsh slaps.
That's good. Thanks, Tanner. When we get into these local political contests, they seem to pale in importance with these international events, but actually are politics is inverted. We have this eye in the sky in Washington, as Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent recently said that 25% of the U.S. economic output and expenditure flows through Washington, which is crazy, right? That's 25% of the action is there in D.C., and power is emanating from D.C. And the reason why it emanates from D.C. and not from your neighborhood is simply because we don't participate. If the citizens would participate in the parties, or particularly in the Republican Party, because, frankly, the Democrat Party is pretty far gone, there is a citizens movement in the Republican Party which is being viciously opposed by the apparatus of the Republican Party. If we would just involve ourselves as citizens and make our feelings known and vote, things would change. The power is supposed to be outside your front door, right down the street to your local high school or your local elementary school or your community center where your local parties hold their meetings. That is where the action was intended to be. And because we have such a successful country over time, American citizens gave up the idea of self-governance. And as I keep saying, we got the most disgusting, vile, and self-serving people into the political process in the void where good Republican people could be. We're just not doing it. And I am seeking and I am looking for, and I'm on the verge of dedicating my life to just the simple effort to encourage every citizen to know that in a Republican form of government, you're the king or queen of this deal. You are the king or queen of your own life. You are the sovereign. But if you abdicate your kingship or queenship, you're powerless. And that's what we've done as the American people. We've abdicated our power and we've allowed it to progressively uh, move uphill, upstream from your neighborhood to the local congressional district, then to the state, and then to the feds. The power just keeps moving and getting more and more centralized. And what the end game is to move that federal power to global governance, global economy, global currency. And then where are we going to be? We're going to be inventory, living in the British business model of slavery, drugs, and piracy, powerless, being exploited from birth to death. Our children worse than we are. Is that really the outcome we seek? Are we so lazy and so satisfied that we're willing to become inventory to have a convenient life and a safe life, as if it's convenient or safe? Because that too is going to wear thin, because the resources that are going to be accruing to each of us as citizens are in a period of diminishing return. Now back to Iran, because this is another issue that CD3 Republicans, Minnesota Republican, the party, they don't want us talking about this. They would say it's too complex. My old chair, Denise Plekish, who's the wife of the current Minnesota GOP head honcho, Alex Plekish, she told the people just aren't ready for this, David. You're just too much for them. In other words, she thinks people are stupid and don't want to deal with the truth. And I don't hold that view. I think people are super intelligent, and if they're given the opportunity to self-govern, they'll do it. And you know when we're going to do it? At the moment, just before it's too late. But could we just pull that forward a little bit and keep this from being a cataclysmic moment just by the act of getting involved? Ooh, what an impact we the people can make. Now, this guy, this dude we were just watching, this Khamenei, he is the longest reigning ruler in the Middle East. He's been in power there for 35 years. And he was talking about, we don't attack first. Now, that sounds strange to our ears because we're constantly told that Iran is funding and directing proxy groups, Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, funding them, arming them. And he's saying, no, what is he? He goes, what's a proxy? These people are on their own, which there is some truth to that. because when you make a decision to pick up a weapon, you are kind of on your own. The outcome is to be determined. So he's not lying when he says that, but when he says we don't strike first, the historical frame of reference, it sounds strange to we the people. This is very similar to, Russia attacked Ukraine and started the war. Well, yeah, if you're just looking at that one day, that's true. But if you go back to 1805, as we continuously do, it's a much more complicated picture about how these wars got started. And from the Iranian perspective, and now this is Persia. This is a country been around thousands of years. So the historical frame of reference is different. And this is something that we could just take a minute on as a sidebar. We're not even a 250-year-old country. Our frame of reference of history is quite narrow compared to, for example, the Chinese, which have a 6,000-year history, or the Persians, thousands of years, or the Jews, almost 6,000 years. When you live in that kind of a culture that has thousands of years of historical events and reference, you have a much different view of causation. And for the Persians, which we call the Iranians now, kind of like we called the Russians the Soviets for a while, they go back to 1953. There was a coup that was dreamed up in Langley and operationalized in Iran by the CIA and the British MI6, where a democratically elected leader of the Persian people, of the Iranian country, of Iran as a country, a guy named Mohammad Mossadegh, was overthrown because he nationalized Iran's oil industry, threatening Western economic interests. So they just got rid of him and stuck a guy in that some of us who are older will remember, the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. He was installed by we the people. Yes, he was a pro-Western monarch, and he made sure the oil kept flowing, and he ruled Iran with an iron fist. He had a secret police called the Savak, which I thought was a great name because it's similar to savage, and they were. And the Iranian people suffered so much under his reign, and he was 100% supported by the United States government, that there was a revolution in 1979. It's called the Iranian Revolution. And during that revolution, the Shah was deposed, and a new anti-American theocracy was established under the Ayatollah Khomeini. And this was the start of an ideological clash because it was a theocracy, which, of course, from a theological, with a theological root, it put Iran into direct conflict with the secular democratic governance of the United States. And the Ayatollah called Israel the little Satan and the United States the great Satan. And we have a hard time as Americans understanding that this is a theocratic state. It's a state dedicated to Islam. That is strange to our way of thinking. And they have a very unique political system, the Iranians. If you go study it, they have a supreme leader who is the highest authority, and he oversees all the branches of government, and he is a cleric. He is chosen by something called the Assembly of Experts. It's an Islamic body. It's a body of scholars. So the supreme leader is there to maintain the Islamic integrity of the state. That's interesting. Different. They have a president. The people get to elect a president, and he is the head of the executive branch. He manages the day-to-day governance, the economic policy, and foreign affairs. He's elected by popular vote every 4 years. He has a 2-term limit. Sounds familiar, right? In other words, there's certain Republican ideas that are woven into this theocratic structure. Right now, the president is a dude named Masoud Pezeshkian, who is a reformer. He's a reformer. He wants to move Iran more into a Republican kind of governance. But, his influence is limited by the structure of the state. There is a parliament. There's 290 members of a parliament that are elected. But the power is really held in a guardian council. It's a 12-member body that ensures laws and elections conform to the Islamic way. 6 clerics, again, religious people, are appointed by that supreme leader, and 6 jurists elected by parliament are part of this council. There's an assembly of experts. Their role is to oversee the supreme leader. There's 88 of these experts on this council, this council that oversees the supreme leader. They're elected every 8 years, but in practice, they've always been a rubber stamp for the supreme leader. There's a judiciary that enforces Islamic law. The Chief Justice is appointed by that supreme leader, and et cetera and so on. So it is a mix of a Republican form of governance with a theocratic form of governance. It's very interesting. But it really is set up so that the Islamic way is maintained. There's a tension, there's a republicanism, and there's a Islamic core, and this is a tension, but it's really rigged so the country doesn't just flop over and become a modern, a Republican state or even a Democratic state. It is an Islamic state, and that is a very foreign idea to us in the West. There's opposition to this state. It's impossible to tell how deep the opposition is, and it is brutally suppressed by the security apparatus that is there in Iran. But my point taking this moment is to say there is a government there. There's a lot of people. I think it's 80 million people. Maybe it's 60 million. Right now, the leader of that country has received a letter from President Trump giving him 2 months to negotiate. We don't know if the letter said it's 2 months to decide to negotiate or 2 months to negotiate. We really don't know the details. But we played on a previous podcast President Trump's comments that it's down to, he used a golf metaphor, it's down to the final strokes. And he warned Iran not to supply the Houthis. And you put this conflict in context with the potential of the peace efforts unraveling in the Ukraine, and we find ourselves in the deepest, darkest part of the forest with very uncertain outcomes and a Republican Party establishment that is defending not a Donald Trump view of this, but a Nikki Haley or a Mike Pence view of it. And that goes in every state, not just in Minnesota. There is a apparatus of the Republican Party that is really not very supportive of Donald Trump, even though they're giving him the rah-rah and they're wearing the red MAGA hats. They can't wait until he and everything he represents and the populist movement that brought him into power is quashed. And that is their goal, and that's what they're working on. And without more citizen involvement, they will succeed. But I will say to the Republican Party members who are watching me, the party is very close to breaking into, as is the Democrat Party, because we are on the verge of a complete meltdown, and people have survival instincts, and they know intuitively that the Uni Party, the duopoly, the oligopoly that is represented by the core of the Democrat and Republican parties, yes, the Democrats are saying, oh, oligarch. They're on the payroll of the oligarchs. It's almost hilarious. That centrist status quo, bipartisanship, which is constantly erected for the citizens as the goal, in other words, to maintain bipartisanship, the status quo, is going to lead us to, well, not good outcomes, because it's protecting a kind of jingoistic, militaristic security state, one world government, one world economy, one world currency, status quo. And unfortunately, I think many of the people who are involved in the party who hold this position, I'm not quite sure they even understand what it is they're defending. They're just Reagan Republicans, and they believe in the country, and they think peace through strength. And, they're not watching podcasts. They're watching Fox News. They could watch the podcast, and they could watch thousands of podcasts and broaden the scope of their awareness. And I'm going to say to them at that convention, I voted for my favorite president was George H.W. Bush, the person that introduced the concept of the New World Order into common parlance. That was my favorite president. I thought he was great. Shot down in World War II, director of the CIA, ambassador to China. Mr. Spook, I thought he was great. I was a young man. He had a certain kind of a style to him. I loved Donald Rumsfeld. I loved it when he'd walk up in front of the podium during the George W.'s administration and just give the reporters what for. I thought, man, because I was young, I thought, hey, that's a model of male machismo. I like that. And I'm just being frank about it. I mean, I'm being self-revelatory, but I grew out of it. And, in other words, if you're watching me because you're looking for a reason to discredit me, I'm no different than you are. I just changed. And I'm hoping that you'll change too, lest we all die. And the hits just keep on coming. This past week, President Trump, this past Friday, announced that the U.S. Air Force has awarded Boeing, a very sick company, a contract to develop the U.S. Air Force next generation fighter jet. Trump said this new fighter jet will be designated, coincidentally, the F-47. Quote, after a rigorous and thorough competition between some of America's top aerospace companies, the president said, the Air Force is going to be awarding the contract for the next generation air dominance platform to Boeing. Wow. So the hits just keep on coming. This military-industrial complex is planned out far into the future with no effort really to rein it in as of yet. President Trump has to be very careful about how he handles these folks because they have no problem pursuing their own agenda. Meanwhile, as President Trump tries to pull out of this European nightmare, the Europeans are trying to figure out how to go ahead without the United States of America. They're not very good at that because they don't agree with each other. The integration of the European Union is nowhere near as tight as the United States of America, and they're having a hard time agreeing on how they're going to get this job done should the United States pull out of Europe. We know there's and if you're listening to me and you're going to be a delegate to the CD3 convention, listen to this one. Do you know that King Charles asked President Trump to join the Commonwealth? All of us can look up what the Commonwealth is. It is the vestiges of the old British colonial empire. For example, Canada is a member of the Commonwealth. The sovereign of Canada is actually a king. King Charles is actually in charge of what goes on in Canada. And King Charles asked the United States to join. Now, really, what's going on with this? It means that things are really a jump ball. As I said earlier in the podcast, the original plan of the globalists to establish this one world government are irretrievably fractured, and they've been fractured for a very long time. They've been fractured since the Chinese double-crossed the European globalists and American globalists and said, we want to run the deal. So it's kind of like a mafia with these different families. And every once in a while, as it's said in The Godfather, a movie I hope sometimes Tanner watches, there has to be a bloodletting every once in a while to get rid of the bad blood. And the question is, how bad is this bloodletting going to get? It's already pretty bad. This week it was announced that 50,000 Palestinians have so far been killed in the war in the Gaza. 50,000. And that is a very conservative estimate. There were protests against the ongoing war in genocide, which many people, did I call it a genocide just now? I meant to call it a war. That was a Freudian slip. I was trying to cover up something. I was going to say it's a war that many people term a genocide, and I called it a genocide. Generally speaking, when it's 50,000 on one side dead and 2,000 on the other, it is what it is. So there was protests, and of course, my daughter, as I've said many times, is at Columbia. Oh, that reminds me. I have to make a correction because, this is a podcast where I try to be as open about what's going on in my life as is required. And I made a comment about my 5 children, and they all, and my 6th one, everybody's educated, going to college, et cetera, and so on. My youngest daughter called me. She was quite upset with me because I had talked about Penn and, my first 3, I really had no qualms about paying for the University of Minnesota and University of Chicago and California School for the Arts. And of course, I paid for the creation of 3 uber liberals who are quite in conflict with me politically. I paid for it. I was younger. And then I had the second group, and one's right now at Cambridge. But, I remember driving my younger 2 daughters to private school and arguing with them every morning about politics, and it really led to a kind of an unpleasant relationship because I knew they were getting brainwashed. And I said that I paid for it. My youngest daughter, called me. She goes, "You didn't pay for my college, Dad." And I do want to say, and I've said it before, kudos to this young one because she saw all of my angst and ire about paying for these brainwashing institutions, giving my hard-earned pay to these people to turn out communists. And she said, "I didn't ask you to do that. I got a full scholarship." And kudos to her. So however she turns out, it's up to her. And I do respect that very much. So that young girl, I say, I love you and thank you for not making me pay because I didn't want to. And I do have the one girl at Columbia, and this Columbia has been in the news because, as you know, Columbia had very intense protests, anti-war protests. It was the center of those anti-war protests, the center of actually violence as related to this war in the Gaza. And President Trump said he was going to hold back $400 million of the $2 billion that the federal government gives to Columbia every year, even though Columbia has a $15 billion endowment. But without that federal money, Columbia would cease to exist as we know it. And Columbia, without suing, they bent the knee. They said, "Hey, give us the cash." And that's the key for everybody here in Minnesota, in the Minnesota legislature. You control the purse strings of the University of Minnesota. So if we Republicans got control through precinct strategy and got brave Republicans elected to the Minnesota legislature or wherever you live, Kentucky or New York, wherever we could get American citizens that believe in the philosophy of Republicanism, not in the philosophy of the party, but in the philosophy of Republicanism, elected to your state legislature, your legislature controls the purse strings of your local universities, among everything else. The NGOs, 501c3s, the whole 9 is controlled in your state house. So it would be very easy to bring about curriculum changes as President Trump has negotiated with Columbia University. Columbia will implement several notable changes to get that $400 million, including ending mask mandates on campus, granting 36 campus police officers expanded authority to arrest students. Wow. Appointing a senior vice provost with extensive oversight powers for its Middle East, South Asian, and African Studies departments, as well as the Center for Palestinian Studies. Control of the Middle Eastern departments has been the very core of the dispute in the negotiation, and it sparks a big controversy because faculty at Columbia and throughout the nation have deep reservations about letting the federal government dictate how they can operate an academic department. Well, that would be when President Trump is in control. They had no problem with President Biden funding and supporting their operations. So, hey, you know what? We change based on who's holding the purse strings. Columbia University was founded in 1754. Did you hear that? How old this place is? Columbia University was founded before the United States was a country, and it was originally called King's College and was established through royal charter by King George II of Great Britain, making it the oldest institution of higher learning in New York, and it's the fifth oldest in the United States. This place has been around for a very long time and has deep ties to the mother country. Some of the most important people that have ever walked in the United States have been faculty at Columbia University, starting with the very notable John Dewey, who was a philosopher and educator and who was the primary driver of what is now called progressive education. In other words, Mr. Dewey stripped the search for truth out of the educational process. Some other great names include Joseph Stiglitz, an economist and Nobel Prize laureate. Bill Clinton was associated there, Dwight Eisenhower, Henry Kissinger, Madeleine Albright taught there, Hillary Clinton teaches there. It goes on and on. George Stephanopoulos, he's a professor at the School of International and Public Affairs. Eric Holder, former Attorney General. He's a law school graduate from Columbia. It goes on and on. The influence of this institution is pervasive, and it has a multifaceted and long-term relationship with the Central Intelligence Agency. The agency recruits the very best and brightest on the campus. It does research there. MK Ultra programs were run at Columbia. It's really hard to tell what they did there because it's all redacted. Notable alumni and leadership ties with the CIA. It's the center of CIA research and recruitment. So it's a spooky place. And what we're trying to do with President Trump, and I'm going to make clear, I mean, a lot of things President Trump is doing now, really, they're disturbing me. And I know that there's a lot of pushback coming on some of the things that he's doing. So we're going to see how the pushback works because President Trump now is dealing with more issues on a single day than any one human being can pay attention to. So now we're in the fog of war. So, you know, he's either making mistakes or he's letting out really what he believes. And then everything is a series of, you know, horse trades. So, you know, the lack of citizen engagement, let me say it this way. If President Trump had more citizens in the process and had his back, I think he would be very happy about that. He endorses people for jobs and he endorses politicians because you got to play with the people that are on the field. I was in a what they call a nominations committee meeting last night for CD3, and they asked me if I intended to get along with the leadership in the district, many of whom hate me. And they hate me because I believe in what's called the precinct strategy. And the current leader, who's soon to be the former leader, a dude named Randy Sutter, who I actually give a lot of respect to when I'm with him personally, and I don't dislike him. I mean, he served the party, and he's not a bad guy in my as a person. Just that at uh, when I started in CD3 as a political participant, I started a thing called the master classes. And for those of you who want to make some kind of Masonic reference, I'm going to give the disclaimer that's also a musical reference. And I was trying to talk to members of the party about what was going on. And he blessed it at the start. And then when he realized I was searching for truth, he shut it down. And I said, Randy, why are you doing this? And he goes, well, why are you doing it? And I said, I'm doing it to create more Republicans. And his comment was, we don't need more Republicans. We need more work from the Republicans we already have. And I didn't understand it at the time, but when you bring in more people to the party, it changes the power base of the party and could lead to a sweeping away of the neocon, war hawk, old guard that control the apparatus. So they don't want new people in the party. The problem with that is when you make that move, you lose. And that's what's happening here in Minnesota. And that's what I want to change. So the idea of education, it doesn't have to be tied to um, schools, but schools, those are the core transmitters of cultural knowledge and cultural history. And President Trump has taken a blowtorch to these people. He's scared Columbia University. Well, every university in the country has taken note of this, and he took an action against University of Pennsylvania, as we talked about on a previous podcast, and they're going to continue trying to redo the curriculum of the universities. And since I saw you last, President Trump has signed an order that calls for the elimination of the Department of Education, which, of course, is going to be hugely opposed by the Democrat and a lot of Republicans. It's the centralization of our educational curriculum and funding for grade school through high school. And since Jimmy Carter started the Department of Education, it seems clear that student performance has declined, but one could say it was already in decline, and the Department of Education has mediated that. I mean, these are lies and, well, what do they call it? Lies, damn lies, and statistics. It's not possible for me to really assess, and I don't want to get into the argument about whether or not education has improved or not improved. I'm just going to go to one that is dispositive for me. Funding versus outcomes. Listen to this. You'll like this as a taxpayer. Federal education spending has ballooned since the establishment of the Department of Education. Adjusting for inflation, the department's budget grew from $14 billion in 79 to $79 billion in 24. Those are adjusted dollars. So, what was $14 billion in 79 is now $79 billion. That's a lot of increase. Now, you'd think if you took something up by almost 5 times for money, it'd get better. And the total money spent on a per pupil basis in 1960 was $2,122 per pupil. And now in 2019, in that inflation adjusted dollars, it's $13,000 a pupil. So our government, we the people, we're spending more than 6 times more per student today than we were in the 1960s. Boy, we're not getting a lot of bang for that buck, are we? We're not getting it. So we're spending all this money, and it's not working. So President Trump is saying, why are we going to continue to do something that's not working? The fastest way to get out of a hole is quit digging it deeper. So a conclusion could be, and I wrote this out, since the Department of Education's formation, U.S. educational outcomes have not kept pace with expectations or global competition. Test scores have flatlined or declined, international rankings have slipped, and achievement gaps persist, all despite massive funding increases. That's the key. We've upped the cash and not seen a return. Now in business, and I'm guilty of this, I pour millions of dollars of money into projects that fail. And that is a shortcoming for me. And, it has led me to some, moments where I have to say, well, I can't do this. It's not working. Well, this isn't working, and this is the future of our country because it's our children. So across this whole educational sphere, it's probably the most important thing the president is doing is changing this. In the economy, the Fed is working against the president, not a surprise. Well, I'm thinking about doing an entire podcast on the Fed. Many of you know it's a private institution with federal oversight. It's the only institution that can counterfeit money. And it has a dual mandate that is to keep an inflation target of 2% and maximum employment. Kind of a yin-yang thing. And the Fed is keeping the interest rates high, which is curtailing economic activity precisely at the moment that President Trump is trying to rejigger the system, almost guaranteeing an economic slowdown, if not a recession. Meanwhile, for those of you who are checking the pixels on your phone to watch your net worth, pixels on your phone is, we should play that clip from The Wolf of Wall Street, where the Matthew McConaughey character talks about the only goal of the stockbroker is make sure it's like the Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never leave. As long as you never leave, the game just keeps going. And that is the core of the status quo, is that stock market. So the big money, the globalist money, is leaving the stock market to drive the market down to make you and me think that President Trump's plan is a failure. And you hear all this in the press. He's erratic. It's not a plan. It's crazy. It's this, that, thus, and so. Actually, it's quite a great plan. But if they destroy the economy, when I say they, I mean the Fed and the big money. If they destroy the economy, the average person is going to go up, kitchen table issue. I can't afford to buy the G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip for my kid for Christmas. The Republicans got to go. And then we're back to one world government, one world economy, and one world currency. So many things I want to cover. Boy, so many things going on. Let's go into some difficult issues. Can you play this clip under number 4, the Eichhorn follow-up, please?
Good morning. I'm Senator Erin May Quaid. I represent Senate District 56. We are not dispensed with this problem. Mr. Eichhorn was not an anomaly. He is a symptom. As a member of the LGBTQ community, I hear from my Republican colleagues all the time slanderous and baseless claims of accusations of being predators and groomers. But the Republican Party has created a permission structure for Republican leaders to act with sexual predation and be rewarded. In the Republican Party, if you have credible allegations of predation, sexual predation on a child, you get nominated to be the Attorney General. Donald Trump, Pete Hegseth, Linda McMahon, Jim Jordan. Mr. Eichhorn is not an anomaly. He is a symptom. It is time for our Republican colleagues to look in the mirror, do some very real work to dismantle the permission structure that gives Republicans the feeling that they can go about doing this vile behavior, to prey on a child, to arrange allegedly to pay for sex with a child, and think you will get away consequence-free. And obviously this was not, or clearly it was allegedly not the first time. Thank you for being here. This is incredibly harrowing, especially for my colleagues who have teenage daughters, especially for anybody who has sent their daughter to this Capitol to advocate, to lobby, to testify. I can't imagine what's going through their minds. And for the community the community that has been ripped apart, for the family that has been ripped apart. We need our Republican colleagues to take this seriously. We cannot continue in this way. Thank you.
So you are indicting all Republicans for this type of behavior? That seems like a stretch.
Say it again, sorry.
You're indicting all Republicans for this type of behavior and allowing this type of behavior? I don't understand.
If you go back and listen to things that have been said on the floor about Democrats, about the LGBTQ community, the accusations have been confessions. And so what I am asking today is for Republicans to take very seriously the way in which their leadership has created a permission structure for this type of behavior. Because Mr. Eichhorn has resigned. That one specific person is gone. But this is not the first time things like this have happened in our state or across the country. And so what I'm asking for is a real deep, hard look at the problems that exist at the Republican leadership level that make people feel like this is okay, because he obviously thought this was okay. He left this building and went over to arrange, allegedly, to have sex with a child. That requires a whole lot more permission than just a random thought on a Monday.
And our Minnesota GOP chair, Alex Plekish, responded immediately, quote, "The reckless and defamatory comments made today by Minnesota legislator Erin May Quaid, who, by the way, is a legislator from 57A, Apple Valley, Egan, and Rosemont," Chairman Plekish wrote, "are an outrageous and baseless attack, not just on members of the Republican Party, but on the integrity of our democratic discourse. To claim that an entire political party fosters a quote-unquote permission structure for predatory behavior is not only false, but dangerously irresponsible." Senator Eichhorn resigned. He has now been indicted by the feds. There was about 10 people that were caught in that sting, which a sting is a sting. It's close to entrapment, but I'm not an attorney. What do I know? I certainly am watching this whole thing, trying to learn from it, and to be frank with you about what I am learning. Eichhorn's wife filed for divorce yesterday. This guy is he's a tragic character, and Erin May Quaid was bringing up some very interesting ideas about a permission structure, and that the accusations were, what did she call them, an admission? The accusations about the behavior of the LGBTQ plus community, what she was saying was that Republicans had been making, from her perspective, scurrilous claims about her community, the community she represents, and that those accusations were actually admissions, that there was grooming, et cetera, and so on. Okay, so, at face value, what Chair Plekish is saying is true, because Erin May Quaid is using this as a gross political cudgel against her opponents to achieve her own goals. But she is saying something that bears listening to, and that is the permission structure. And that permission structure is not Democrat or Republican. There's something to learn everywhere. And for those of you who have been around the sexually abused or the physically abused, you understand the depravity of the act and what happens to the individuals who are the victims of such predatory behavior. That permission structure. I don't agree with Alex Plekish that it's a baseless attack. This comes from somewhere. Now, I'm going to say that for all of history, there have been people that have done things sexually which are considered not okay for all of history. But I'm old enough to remember a time before the permission structure allowed Erin McQuaid to walk up to a microphone and say she was a member of the LGBTQ plus community. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm saying permission has been granted by who? Who, Alex? Let's be honest about this now, because this could be a moment where we as Minnesotans and we as American citizens start to look at this and go, hey, wait a second. Why is this even possible? Why is this possible? And why, in an era where literally anything goes, almost anything goes, anything goes, anything goes, and these people are predators and they're awful, but why are they the totems like anybody cares about anybody in this way as compared with the era gone by? And what I mean by saying that is, I came of age, and so did Alex, and so did everybody our age, in the 60s and 70s. I remember when no one was divorced. I remember when the one divorced kid in my elementary school, my parents would not let me go to his home because he was in a broken home. I couldn't go there. I couldn't be his friend because my parents judged that because there was a divorce, something was wrong. Something was wrong. So we've come a long way from there to where we are today, where a state legislator can stand up and talk in this fashion. And many of the things that she said were interesting. What is the permission structure? It's wrong to put it just on Republicans. It's not Republicans. It's everyone. We're living in a society where anything goes sexually, except for if you get caught. If you get caught doing something, and for all of us who are watching, to be, a little bit crude about it, if you masturbate to digital images on your cell phone, do you know that person is, of age? And what does of age mean? What does of age mean? Is someone who is being sold as inventory at 25 and has some kind of psychological constellation of traits that allow them to be in that position? Are they less vulnerable because we've drawn a line in the sand at 18? In other words, if this had been an 18-year-old prostitute, there wouldn't have been any issue other than simple prostitution, which is legal in a lot of municipalities. And there's probably an effort to make prostitution legal here in Minnesota. I don't know about it because I'm not following it, but gambling's legal. Drugs are legal. So prostitution can't be far behind, as Don Corleone said in The Godfather, the harmless vices, gambling and prostitution. Don Corleone was afraid of the drug business, which apparently the state of Minnesota has no problem getting involved in. So the permission structure is everybody. It's everybody. And I've been trying to work my way out of this because I was born in the 50s and I didn't know any better. I mean, we didn't know any better. I remember in 1972, I was in high school and we all came back after summer and we started talking, all the classmates, and there was a new thing called the pill. And virtually all the girls in my high school, 1,100 kids in my class, everybody was on the pill. And the pill was sold as, you got to go for your well-being checkup. So you go, you sit down with the doctor, and he was getting some kind of freebie from the drug company to push these pills. And here was the question. And we were young, right? Are you having your menstrual periods yet, my dear? Yes, I am, doctor. Are you bleeding a lot? Oh, yes, I am. Because, of course, how would they know, a lot or a little? It's a private deal. And it's scary, I'm sure. First time you're bleeding, got to be scary. Maybe it's not, but it would be for me. And the doctor said, would you like to bleed less? Well, yeah, I sure would. That sounds great. Well, take these pills and you got to come back in 3 months. We got to check on you, but this is going to make your menstrual symptoms less problematic in your life. Less pain, less this, less that, but you're going to have to come back. We're going to have to check you. So they sold the pills and they sold the comeback, and it really wasn't fenced originally as a birth control strategy. It was fenced originally as relief. I'm just telling you what I remember. Now, I could not be 100% correct. This is what the friends of mine reported to me. This is a long time ago now, 72. But what I remember was people were talking about lessening the symptoms of their menstrual periods. And it didn't take very long for the birth control aspect to play in. And then in 73, we had Roe versus Wade, which was if the pill doesn't work, we got a backup. And by 74, it was Katie, bar the doors. So from my perspective, having lived through it, knowing what happened, I was there in St. Paul, Minnesota, at a high school called Highland Park Senior High School. I remember the behavior of my own behavior and the behavior of my classmates, and the permission structure was right there and then. And what we were told was nothing. Nobody said, stop. In my life, at least, and I came from a religious family. I'm not even sure my parents knew what was going on. So between the drugs that were introduced at that time and the free sex and love that was introduced at that time, the permission structure was, if you don't get caught, it's not illegal. And that has spread itself out now to everything. And I only bring up this sexual issue because it's so difficult to talk about, even to this day, that we really don't recognize the hell that's come forth through the permission. And so for all the old Democrats and Republicans my age who look at this and have comments about it, hey, we were the shock troops of this current issue. I am sure, and I know for a fact, that there were this kind of depravity has existed, but it was never allowed for the general public to do anything they wanted to do. There were rules, and all those rules were removed. The guardrails were taken off. So the incidence of depravity increased, and of course, then you get more prosecutions and more evidence thereof. But it is not limited to Republicans. If I wanted to go look, I could find thousands of Democrat incidents of this kind of sexual depravity. I'm talking about elected officials. It's not just one side or the other. So that was deeply ingenuous by this Erin May Quaid. She was using it as a cudgel. But the permission structure part of it, what could we get out of this Eichhorn event? We could start to examine the things nobody wants to talk about, which is what's going on sexually in our society. Here's something that people are going to reject from Corinthians. Flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. And I have been working on this because I was that child in 1972, and I had no guardrails. And I have put the guardrails on myself now, and I'm fully functional. And I prayed, please, God, give me guardrails before it doesn't matter. Because, everybody gets religion when nothing works. When you can't get out of a chair hey, hard to sin when you can't get up. When you're still functional, that's really important. And what I'm trying to say, not that I want to be a Baptist preacher, because I'm not Baptist, but I do want to preach that we need to think through these issues. And if we would like to improve the lives of inventoried girls and boys who are underage and who are being exploited sexually for money and for the depraved urges and needs of the sexually sick, we can do a lot just by healing our own depravity. That's why we're Republicans. We're self-governing. That's the key to this thing. And we have to discover these truths for ourselves in our own way. And it means something different to every one of us because the Creator granted us life, liberty, and our own pursuit of happiness. But we as a culture, we as a country have gone off a cliff with these things, and nobody wants to talk about it. We just want to hang up the occasional depraved violator as a totem and cover up the sexual depravity of our whole culture, which is everywhere all the time. And if we don't deal with it, if we don't have the courage to look at it and to start to sort through it individually, this is not a group grope. This is an individual quest for truth. Each of us are going to come to a different understanding because we're like snowflakes. We're all different, right? But as we move up the spokes to the hub, I think we're going to understand that in the place we have sexual gratification, that spot, at least for me, is the place where the search for truth gets crowded out. And I would rather myself, having sinned prodigiously, I would rather search for truth than stay addicted to this permission structure. Well, the party just keeps on going. CD7, this is a statement from Alex Plekish. Congresswoman Michelle Fischbach has been a steadfast leader, delivering conservative results for Minnesota families while fighting for lower taxes, safer communities, and a stronger economy. Her dedication to common sense policies and putting her constituents first is why she continues to earn overwhelming support, including being the top vote getter of either party in Minnesota elections history. To summarize, the Republican Party, this is from Alex, the Republican Party of Minnesota proudly supports Representative Fischbach in her reelection campaign and looks forward to her continued work fighting for Minnesota values in Congress. There's one problem for this. The party is putting their thumbs on the scale before we even have the 2026 midterm elections. What is this, Chairman Plekish? I don't understand it. I don't. And if I was in your role, I wouldn't do it. Because it's up to the citizens of this district, CD7, to decide who will represent them. And there are Republicans in that district who don't support Representative Michelle Fischbach. And we wonder why our Republican Party is on the verge of breaking into. Well, that would be because there's an apparatus that is supporting not all Republicans and letting the Republicans vote to sort it out, but they're censoring Republicans, as was done this past week by the Minnesota Republican Party. For immediate release, March 21, statement from the Republican Party Minnesota Chair Alex Plekish on Executive Committee action regarding Action for Liberty. Quote, last night, the Republican Party of Minnesota's Executive Committee passed a motion brought forward by 6th Congressional District Chair Bobby Benson to formally address concerns related to the conduct of Action for Liberty's leadership. While it is not typical for the Republican Party of Minnesota to issue official declarations about individual organizations, the State Executive Committee determined that doing so at this time was appropriate. The chair, Alex Plekish, and the deputy chair, Donna Bergstrom, abstained from the vote. A majority of the executive committee members voted in favor of the resolution, while others opposed it. The motion was debated in an executive session and reflected differing views on both the substance and timing of the action. The declaration reads, quote, "The Republican Party of Minnesota fully and unequivocally condemns the actions and behavior of the leadership at Action for Liberty. Action for Liberty's leadership has made it clear that they are more concerned about tearing down Republicans in Minnesota than they are with our party's purpose of electing Republicans to office and supporting our incumbents. Unfortunately, it goes beyond attacking publicly elected officials as they are continuing their practice of publicly doxing in the trenches volunteers for daring to do something they don't agree with. Many of those who support Action for Liberty may be good and honest people who want to see real change in Minnesota, but the leadership of the organization instead works only to enrich themselves, attack those actually making a difference, and claim victories they had nothing to do with." And then Alex continued, "As chair, my focus remains on electing Republicans." Okay, well, my focus is on supporting the administration's agenda. I am not really, this fight proceeded by focus on it, and I don't understand all the aspects of it or why the party has focused such ire upon an organization which is supported by thousands, tens of thousands of Minnesota Republicans. So although the statement says that they might be good and honest people, actually what the statement is saying is they're being duped by self-interested grifters. I know some of these people at Action for Liberty. They're not self-interested grifters. What they believe is that there's globalists and nationalists, and they're focused on changing the party, as the statement said, so that it reflects what? The current administration of Donald Trump, the president of the United States. So we have a problem here in Minnesota that is now bubbling up to the highest level of conflict. I personally have an appeal to make to the apparatus. There's communists afoot. Communists. Could we please knock it off and unify together and have this fight afterwards, after we restore republicanism in the state of Minnesota? And for those of you who don't understand what that means, please, there's 190 episodes here. You can go back or just Google up Republicanism, the philosophy, and let's see if our party is aligning itself with the party of Abraham Lincoln. Let's look at the history of the party and try to come together, not with some kind of partisan hack competition, but let's align with the philosophy that is about sovereign citizens, limited government, protecting minority rights, beware of foreign entanglements, and peace and prosperity, which is the essence of the philosophy that our party alleges to ensue. Let us look at these issues and let's find a way to stop this kind of, shall we say, in my opinion, kind of a childish issue. Now, I watched this going on, and I'm going to read what I posted up because I thought it was somewhat eloquent. This was my post up in response to this. This is what I shared. Democrat, this is for all of you party apparatus people, and I don't mean this as an insult. This is an educational moment, a teaching moment where we can all learn from each other. Democrat versus Republican no longer has the same meaning. A far better description of world events is globalist versus nationalist. When the current party leadership accepts this change, this conflict will lessen. And here's a note to party leadership. Too many of our citizens are now realigning along this new description of reality. There's no reason to fight this change, of course, unless you are a Democrat, a purveyor of the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. And that's the fight in the party between people that are interested in republicanism and people that want to maintain the Democrat liberal order. Please, I'm not saying this to be mean. I'm saying this, let's have a dialogue about this. Maybe we should bring back the master classes, Alex, and we could all talk about this. Let me continue. Action for Liberty is simply a lightning rod for this change. So is Steve Bannon, who has a tremendous following here in Minnesota. So is Royce White. And guess what? So is President Trump, who is pursuing policies that are exactly reflective of this globalist versus nationalist ideological competition. Republicans need not fight among ourselves any further. Let's dislodge the communists. Please stop this. It's pathetic. We are in a struggle for the future of our country. The real question to ask is, who among us is truly a nationalist? In other words, who is really supportive of the new administration? And what does that mean? MnGOP could unify all state Republicans by allowing a dialogue about these issues to be had in every precinct, and I raise my hand as a volunteer to hold these meetings. We are living in a world war, and let us remember that a house divided cannot stand. We're going to have to work our way through this. It's not fun, but it is reflective of civil war. And this war is going to continue. It's going to get more intense, and the citizens will lose this war to the apparatus, to the purveyors of the post-World War II Democrat liberal order, to the purveyors of the Uni Party, to the purveyors of bipartisanship, unless they get involved and elect people to office in the party and elective office in the state and in the country that believe in the philosophy of republicanism. I mean, that's what's going on now. This is the last gasp of the original meaning of this country. This is a counter-revolution against over 100 years of ending republicanism and replacing it with world government. That's what we're fighting, having a country or having a world government. If you want a country that's a Republican country with a constitution that makes you the king or queen of your own life and protects minority rights, you got to get involved. There's no way I can win an election when the apparatus is controlled by people who are purveyors of the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. They view me as a threat. I'm not a threat. I'm trying to talk to you and say, I was just like you. Please wake up. Please. I know you love this country. I know many of you served this country. I respect it. I'm waiting. Please, let's wake up. I'll tell you how asleep we are. Can you please play under number 5, where it says CD7 and MnGOP, the clip that's from Marion O'Neill of 29B, Buffalo and Monticello fraud.
I would just point to the audited financials on page 6. And when I looked at the total amount of government grants, government fees and grants that you receive, it says $222.9 million, which is 87% of the total revenue. I will just point that out. So 87% of your revenue comes from government grants currently. The other thing I would point out is on the 990, page 8, and it has the highest paid folks, so it's your president and senior vice president and so on, and at my count, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there are 10 people paid more than the governor, and the top person being paid $420,000 after all of the extra expenses are counted in. So that all in, $420,000, 10 being paid more than the governor. The reason I point that out is because 87% of your funds come from government sources, and so I've served about a decade on the subcommittee on employee relations, which reviews all the state employee contracts, and it also reviews any kind of waivers. So any local government, doesn't matter who you are, if you want to pay more than the governor, you actually have to come before the legislature to get a waiver to pay anybody more than the governor. It's something that we've been talking about the whole time that we've been having hearings. And so I just want to point out on those documents that 10 of your employees do make more than the governor, and you get 87% of your funds, according to your audited financials of 2024, from government sources. So I just wanted that on the record because we do have all those documents in front of us, and I believe Representative Claiborne has a question.
Madam Chair, I think I want to be very respectful of what you just said, but when you think about the work that Lutheran Social Services does and how much of the work that they do for older Americans who Lutheran Social Services receives those grants through a whole host of really important work, and I believe you were probably one of the largest care providers in our state for people, for older Americans and people living with disabilities, and that this money that you're receiving is not like, I mean, many of the services that you provide are actually you're not making money. I will say that.
Well, there you go. There's your post-World War II Democrat liberal order in full flower. Marion O'Neill, a Republican from 29B, brings forth that, oh my God, Lutheran Social Services, we're going to criticize Lutheran Social Services. Well, go back, look at the thing on Yante culture. We don't, and then, oh, here comes Jenny Claiborne. Reminds me so much of the people that crushed me in my 45 Senate district election. This kind of, oh, it's Lutheran Social Services, they do such important work. And at the end, they're not making any money. You know, there's 10 people there that make more than the governor. Representative Jenny Claiborne, this Democrat, it's so angering. If you want to make $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 a year, don't make it off the taxpayers. Go open up a business and provide a service or a product that justifies your income. I don't care what Lutheran Social Services delivers to the citizens of Minnesota. The people that work there are in the public service business because the taxpayers are paying for them to do it, which means there needs to be some modesty. But of course, when anything goes sexually, if there's no rules sexually, then robbing and stealing is nothing compared to that. So if I can make $600,000 or $700,000 or $800,000 a year running a public service organization, of course, the company doesn't make any money. The company does. Let's all close ranks around the Lutheran Social Services because it does such good work. This is what we're dealing with, and the way to heal this, first, physician, heal thyself. We're going to go out with one more clip, which kind of summarizes the whole deal. The next one right afterwards.
But I think it's something the committee has deep concerns about is the business model of fraud. And so in my research, in testimony before the committee and in meetings with whistleblowers, what seems to occur is that vulnerable people in our state are preyed upon by people who are greedy and want to make money off them. And so they sign people up for services that may or may not be received, and then they either overbill or bill for services not rendered, or add in additional services that may not be necessary. And then people who really are in need of services either don't get the services or are sort of kept in a loop so that they don't really get better and continue to get signed up for services when they don't recover. And that seems to be the business model that I am discovering as I work through all these different programs and as we have testimony on the record or off the record.
Well, that's Kristen Robbins, who is a elected representative here in Minnesota, and she's been around for a while. In fact, I hear that she's running for U.S. Senate. She was elected in 2018. Well, see, now it's fashionable to talk about the business model. It was fashionable in 2018. No, it wasn't. It was not fashionable. See? But the fraud existed then. What Kristen Robbins is describing is government, the entire thing. That's what's so great about this clip. I hope you go watch it again. That is a description of government preying on the vulnerable individuals. That'd be we the people, the citizens, signing us up for services we may or may not need, then making a ton of money off of it, and then keeping us in a loop so we don't get better. That is the classic definition of what government is doing. So it's not limited to Lutheran social services. It's the whole country. So thank you, Kristen Robbins, for giving such a full-throated explanation of how we, the people, are being abused by the people we elect to protect us. Thank you so much. On that note, I got angry at the end of this because this thing's getting ready to bust, and I'm in the middle of it. You know, there's a certain amount of liberation by not having to be involved with people who have no interest in waking up. But for all of you that wish to wake up, God bless you, and may your alarm clock ring soon. We need you to change. We are in a period of intense change. The entire world is realigning. Every country in the world is part of this realignment. Please, the apparatus, please look, read the newspaper. Look at what's happening in Romania, in Poland, in England, in Germany, all over the world. Look at the war and the depravity, and let us come together and root out the globalist communists that are really still here in Minnesota in complete control of robbing we the people. Now, to go out on a light note, we haven't done any music for a while. I got something from the way back, someone most of you don't know, a dude named Sammy Davis Jr. And I'm going to ask Tanner to cue this clip up on the way out. I thank you for joining. I look forward to being back with you on Thursday night, God willing.
Have a good night, everybody.
This gives a chance to wail a little bit with the band. It seems that every time I do the Palace, I always get a chance because of Mitch being such a nice guy and the guys in the band being like old cats that we know, to sit in with the guys. And I couldn't resist this particular number this time because I got the sweet. It's over there on the trumpet. Sweet man. Look out, George.